prominence by being crowned state champions at the 2021 Missouri State Dance Championships. The squad placed first in precision dance, first in pom, and first overall in Division 6. It becomes the 10th state championship in program history for the Sapphires. Congratulations to head coach Maggie Willis and her entire program for this fantastic achievement. And then staying with the dance theme this evening, to go with a strong team finish at the Missouri State Dance Championships, the Liberty North High School Golden Girls also claimed 2 individual state championships. Alyssa Lee was crowned state champion in the freshman soloist category, while Lucy Vitug was the individual champion in the junior soloist category. Congratulations to these talented young ladies. And as I mentioned just before the break, I had a chance to visit with some of these overachievers. And Brian, if you'd go ahead and play the video, we'll meet them here on the video screen.
Well, thank you for the recognition. I appreciate it. I feel really fortunate to work in Liberty Public Schools. I have a wonderful team here that I work with, counselors and social workers, administrative assistants, our admin team. Everybody is just great. So it's just a privilege, and I feel very honored. So thank you very much.
It means a lot of dedication and hard work because we put in so many hours every single week that a lot of people don't know about. And it's just year-round, and people don't really understand that concept when we say that we are truly year-round, and especially this year, we're going March to March, season to season. I would say thank you. It's so much support so necessary, especially in the season being virtual. You have an audience, which is just weird, so having that congratulations and that support outside of filming and outside of practices is just really necessary.
Hi, I'm Alyssa Lee, and I'm a freshman at Liberty North. Hi, I'm Lucy Vitug, and I'm a junior at Liberty North. And we would like to thank the Board of Education for congratulating us on the recent state championships for dance. And thank our coaches and our teams for the support.
And with that, I will turn it over to Miss Graham.
All right. Well, we don't have our honorees in attendance here tonight, but because we are streaming, I think that it's appropriate for us to do our honorary standing ovation for our state champion teams and individuals. Okay. Moving on, 2.04, this is our public comment section. Do we have anyone here who is here for public comment? Okay. Then moving on to our consent agenda, section 3.01 to 3.07. Our adopted rules of parliamentary procedure, Robert's Rules, provide for a consent agenda listing several items for approval of the board by a single motion. Documentation concerning these items has been provided to all board members and the public in advance to assure an extensive and thorough review. Items may be removed from the consent agenda at the request of any board member.
I move the board approve consent agenda items 3.01 through 3.07. Second.
Sandra?
Peter's freezing. AJ?
Yes.
Scott?
Yes.
Angie?
Yes.
David?
Yes.
Andy?
Yes.
Nick?
Yes.
Kim Marie?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Right. Moves us on to reports from the administration.
First off is 4.01 and our Innovation and Learning Department report. So we'll welcome Dr. Moore to the podium. Turn it over to her.
Good evening. Tonight in the Innovation and Learning report, you will see 3 annual reports from Fine Arts Department, Library Media, and Special Programs. We hope you find this new format informative. Next month we will have an athletic review for the year. We had many students return to school yesterday. Our secondary schools are working hard to prepare the April 5th return of all students. We will ask families in the coming week to let us know if they are going to be with us 4 days or if they're going to be learning asynchronously. Our library media program got great news over spring break. 4 of our secondary library programs received recognition as exemplary library programs in the state. Congrats to DMS, LMS, Liberty High School, and Liberty North. Only 7 schools across the state were recognized. These schools were scored by a team of school librarians from across Missouri on 21 indicators. Scores evaluated the programs on instruction, leadership, library environment, library management, and staffing. To achieve the DESE recognition, applicants had to receive a minimum score of 38 out of 42 without receiving a score of 0 on any of the 21 indicators. So we're really proud of the work that they've done. Our EIP program also had great news we wanted to share. Educators Rising is the career and technical student organization for the educational internship program. Aspiring teachers and leaders from across Missouri participate in workshops and competitions in a variety of areas. Liberty North High School has been the top chapter in the state since they began participating 3 years ago. This year, 16 Liberty North students competed in 16 different events, and 9 Liberty High School students participated in 7 different competitions. 15 Liberty North students placed in the top 3, with 9 first-place winners. 5 Liberty High School students placed in the top 3, with 3 first-place finishes. In addition to the state competition, students presented on topics like neurodiversity, relationship building, and working with English language learners at a regional conference last semester, and they created a virtual library for the Diversity Festival. I want to thank Melissa Taylor for her work with that group. Sorry, I had to read it to make sure I got it all right. In other news, we have confirmed graduation for our senior class for May 23rd at Children's Mercy Park. I had the opportunity to work with both senior classes prior to spring break to plan a senior week celebration as well. Details coming soon. But I just want to say I'm really proud that those 2 groups of student leaders came together to plan something collectively for all seniors across the district. And then finally, the EDGE Micro School has already had some great success. We've had over 110 students who've been accepted into the micro school for next year. We were hoping for between 75 and 100, realizing we'd probably be closer to 75, and we're around 112 or 113. So really excited about that. In addition, we've been published twice now through Getting Smart, and Dr. Adams and Mrs. Wickham had the opportunity to write a blog for Getting Smart about the journey that we went through to create the micro school. So we appreciate the support of the board as we really make this a reality for our students. With that, I'll take any questions.
Any questions for Dr. Moore or Dr. Westfall?
No, Dr. Moore, just looking at enrollment early, I know, for kindergarten and summer school. Are we on track? I can't remember what the typical numbers are at this point.
Yeah, we're doing well. For kindergarten started on March 1st,
Yep.
so still those numbers are coming in every day. And then our numbers for summer school have been strong and very similar to what they've been in the past.
Okay, cool.
I'm sorry, this portion of the meeting is for board members only.
I do want to point one thing out. As Dr. Moore was sharing, the formatting for the program evaluations that you have in front of you are kind of a test run for us. As we've been talking both last fall and into this spring semester, revisiting our perpetual calendar, program evaluation approaches. We've put together a format that you'll be seeing over the course of the next couple of months. And then pull the board together in June through a board retreat to be able to say, we like this, we don't like this, we'd like to see more or less of something, so that we can solidify that along with our perpetual calendar as we turn the page into July 1 and the start of the next academic year. So be thinking about what you would like to see from a board perspective that then sits public facing for our community, so that we can tweak that along the way. So, okay?
I would just like to say your 3 writers have all very different styles,
Yes,
and it's
we do.
fun to watch their personalities kind of
Yes.
peek out.
Yes, absolutely. I noticed that too.
I really like the first part because it does a nice overview. So if you don't want to read all, however many pages there are. But it gives you a better understanding of what this year has looked like in those different departments. And I appreciate the work that those teams have done this year. And hopefully next year it will look very different because we won't be dealing with COVID.
Thank you, Dr. Moore. Appreciate it. Next up then, under 4.02, we will welcome Dr. Andrea Dixon-Seahorn to the podium for our equity report.
I knew that was going to happen.
Oh, no.
I thought I had it down to a science. Good evening, everybody. It's so good to be here with you this evening to share some highlights from the Office of Equity report. It was kind of lengthy this month. A lot of things have been happening, and I just wanted to just kind of zero in on one thing from each one of the strategic plan components that fall under our purview. So for the equity action planning strand, which is strategic plan number 4, just wanted to highlight the fact that our DEI book talk series has come to a close. We've had 4 of those this year. It's been about professional learning for all of our district leaders who chose to participate in those. And of approximately 75 DLT members, we had 62 people participate. They got to choose which one they wanted to come to. And as you know, I think I've shared this with you previously, we've had some that attended all 4. So kudos to them. And we see that as part of this equity action planning process because that just gives the background knowledge, the lived experience by way of participating in those book talks, and then it then informs professional practice. And so we will be sending out a formal survey on this Friday to get some feedback on how was it and how is it now informing and changing your professional practice. With respect to strategic plan number 7, this is really about the equity audits and assessments. We have a number of those happening. You did see references to them in the library services report, as well as fine arts, things that they're doing. But today I just wanted to zero in on the equity in schools cohort. That equity audit was quite extensive. Several of you in this room can attest to that. It was a 6-hour event over 2 different days, and just wanted to share with you just very briefly some preliminary data. You have that in your report. We can see in the area of diversity being referenced as just population demographics. Our score is 54%, which is developing based on the scale that you see there in front of you, developed by the beloved community, our facilitators for this work. With respect to inclusion, our current score is 43%. That means we're at the emerging levels, and that's pretty consistent with the data that was derived from the equity talks that we had with all of you, as well as cabinet members and other district leaders. With respect to equity, our score at this time is around 63%. We're in the developing range, but you notice that score is a little bit higher than the other 3. Doesn't surprise me because, after all, we have an equity-centered strategic plan, right? And so we are moving the needle within that area. So you'll see the various subcategories that go along with that. We'll have a formal convening with beloved community, our district leadership team that are part of the Equity in Schools cohort, along with our facilitator from beloved community. I think that's coming up on April the 5th. And we'll learn more about our data, what it means for us, and how we can use that to develop some more actionable steps as part of our equity-centered strategic plan. Moving down to strategic plan number 5, culturally responsive teaching practices. I did share with you the most recent data that we've pulled with respect to the Cultural Competence Online Resource Hub that's been developed this year by a team, the Cultural Competency Work Group, and you can just see the stats that go along with those usage rates. This would be from January 1st through February the 28th. Just wanted to focus in on the 2 strands of cultural competence and cultural responsiveness. You'll see that we've had a number of page views for each of those, about 45 for cultural competence. And what I made note of is that people were spending more time on that particular page And therefore, there were higher levels of engagement, meaning they were spending more time there, scrolling through the resources that are available. And then for the strand of cultural responsiveness, you see it's kind of flat, but then it spikes. And that aligns with a principal who shared with me that they spent some time around professional learning experiences for their staff. And so it looks like they had their staff members log on to a resource, probably a short video of some kind, and that's why you see that spike. And so it had the highest use average of about 5 minutes for that particular resource. So we're just continuing to monitor, and then also continuing to update the resources that are readily available to staff. And again, this would be for classified and certified staff members. With respect to strategic plan number 14, I think this is one of the ones I'm so excited about sharing this evening. This is about stakeholder engagement around cross-cultural communication, and as you know, we spent the first 2 weeks in March doing just that, having conversations with young people, elementary students, secondary students, grades 5, 7, and 11. There were about 87 students, so approximately 90 students that we got to have this touch point with, to hear from their lens, their experiences, what we need to do better around DEI, and then approximately 30, just under 30 family representatives that attended sessions. And so now we're in the process of gathering all that data, making sense of it, and we'll come back to you before the end of the year and share with you our findings and any recommendations for moving forward. And then last but not least, strategic plan number 22. This is around cultural competence and proficiency. This is about our professional learning across the organization. So I'm partnering with Dr. Westfall as the assistant superintendent of innovation and learning. And we have a committee, and we're now in the process of developing that RFP for formalized PD around diversity, equity, inclusion, again, across the entire organization. So those are highlights for today. Any questions or comments? I'll take those at this time.
Questions for Dr. Dixon Seahorn?
Just looking at the beloved community information, it's great and gives good context. The inclusion score is one where I see we've got some that are on the lower end, and then we've got this shared voice, shared power at 61%, which is high. Any insight as to what that kind of represents, that shared voice, shared power?
You know, I thought about that, and I anticipated a question around that. So there are opportunities where voices can be heard and where people can weigh in on decision-making at all tiers of the organization, so that's why that's rated higher than others. But in terms of the communication across the organization, you see that scored very low. Where it says language, that's really about just the overall communication. That's where we kind of got a hit. And again, as we completed this audit, we were being very honest with ourselves. There were some questions where we stopped and had long conversations, and finally it was like, okay, folks, we got to reach consensus. Yes, no, there's no in between. What's the answer? Can we agree to it and move forward? So that is just an example of within that particular strand, we scored higher because we had consensus around, yes, there are an abundant opportunities for the shared voice and power within the organization.
Gotcha.
Based on just the structure, organizational structure that currently exists.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
So with the book series that you did with administration, is there thought of taking that to the building level?
I'm glad you asked that one as well. It already is happening.
Awesome.
And that's part of informing the professional practice, building the equity leadership capacity within school leaders in particular, and even some directors are taking it back to their respective departments. So they get to decide which book they want to zero in on. They may not choose any of those, but some have selected their own books, they've purchased them, and they're having these conversations, at least at the very minimum, with their teacher leadership teams at the building level. So
Good.
that is happening now.
That's amazing. Thank you.
If we were scoring somewhere and expanding in terms of school district, what might that look like? Expansion.
Expansion.
And that score
for-
expanding, what would it look like possibly? What would we be seeing?
You're talking about for the
The
equity
scoring.
audit, the
Yes.
score?
Mhm.
I don't have the answer to that question yet because we have not had our consultation session with them, but that's one of the things I would want to know. What does it mean? What are the look-fors for expansion? What are the look-fors for advancement? So those are questions we're going to pose to them.
Okay.
I just thought you would be interested because you knew we had spent all this time on this audit, and I wanted to give you something. And so when I come back again next month, I'll have more details for you around that.
It gives us something tangible to look at. Thank you.
Absolutely.
And beyond that, it gives you areas to focus in on, but it also reinforces some of the work that we have within our equity-centered strategic plan and some of the plan updates that Dr. Dixon Seahorn provided. So very thorough. I don't know how many hours we spent on it entirely over those couple of days, but
At least 6.
we spent a few hours in
And then
here
there was
kind of walking
pre-work.
through each of those items. So we look forward to the other sessions with beloved community.
Yeah.
Other questions for Dr. Dixon Seahorn? Thank you. Next up then, Ms. Cindy Sullivan, as it relates to 4.03 in our finance report.
Good evening, everyone. In addition to the report that's posted for you, I have a couple things to share with you. Our March state payment was up to a proration of 97%, which is excellent compared to where we thought we would be. And by all indications, we do believe that by June we will be fully funded at 100%. So that's definitely cause for celebration. Tomorrow, another reason to celebrate, we will receive payments for state assessed railroad and utilities and our pilot payments in lieu of taxes from the Shoal Creek TIF. Those are our last 2 large outstanding county property tax to receive. So those are both coming in larger than expected. So that gives me cause to believe that the 1-year lapse in our collection rate was just that, a 1-year lapse due to COVID, because we're getting delinquent and back taxes as well as current taxes timely this year. So that's another reason to look forward maybe to next year being back on track to where we can expect as it has been in the past. We also had the Audit and Finance Committee meet last night, had a real good meeting with them. They had some great questions, but they did not have anything of concern that they wanted to pass on to you. And with that, I will take any questions over those items on my report from you tonight.
We will hear a little bit later on from Cindy as it relates to our revenue projections, but any questions for Cindy right now as it relates to her report?
We received our gas bill recently.
We have not. That one scares me a little bit after hearing what some other people have gotten.
Yeah.
Shawnee Mission School District received a $1.6 million gas bill this time. Yeah. So more to come.
Other questions of Cindy? Okay, we'll see you back here in just a little bit.
Sure,
So
thank
thank you. 4.04 then, our operations report from Mr. Anderson.
Thank you. In addition to the report that's loaded up, I'm just going to highlight a few things related to some of the work and planning in and around back to school, getting back to school on the 5th, and then also Operation Safe. I think as most of you know that the district was pretty involved early on with Operation Safe, along with the City of Liberty and Liberty Hospital. And as that expanded to include North Kansas City and Cerner, we've kind of politely stepped back a little bit, but then also continue to offer our support whenever it might be helpful. And just, we've not done a really good job of sharing this, but to date, we've had, our transportation department was called on to run some shuttles back and forth to a couple senior centers. Our distribution department was called upon to move some water and beverages back and forth. And then our nursing staff has been volunteering down there and will continue to do so. So really appreciate everybody's efforts. And I also know that Ms. Graham and maybe some others have volunteered down there as well to help with Operation Safe. I did also want to call out, we've been working very closely with Michelle Lane, who is with North Kansas City Hospital. I think her title is Director of Community Health. And then Dr. Adiga, who's the Chief Medical Officer at Liberty Hospital. They've been such great partners to us and kind of keeping us in the loop as that plan is unfolded, especially as it related to planning for our bringing an opportunity to our team here last week. So just wanted to recognize both of them and all their work, and then that whole team, which has just been fantastic. So again, that clinic last week, all of our staff who are indeed interested or were interested in receiving the vaccine were processed through down there and will be receiving their vaccine or second dose here in the next couple weeks. We are actively planning in and around that. That could be a little bit problematic for us, but we have had many of our folks get vaccines kind of through different means and opportunities. So we're not quite sure how that's going to look when we get there as people are called out to get their second dose. but we have been working with Operation Safe, and they're going to include some additional hours kind of beyond 3 o'clock, and we're going to communicate to our teams and our folks as they schedule that second dose to maybe take advantage of some of those after-school hours. And then the last thing I just point out, and Dr. Moore alluded to this, we are actively working both on the operations side and collaboratively with the folks at the building level as we're planning for the 4-day-a-week startup here on the 5th. Our folks on the operations side were pretty busy over spring break, kind of moving furniture and getting preparations in place. And so just feel pretty good about where things stand right now and being ready for that on the 5th, and of course transportation and the routing of all those kids as we bring them in. So feel good about that. We've got a little bit of work ahead of us, but I think we're in pretty good shape. And with that, I'd be happy to take any questions.
Questions of Mr. Anderson?
I have a couple. With moving the kids back in, what does that do to the distancing issue? I'm assuming we can no longer do the 6 feet.
Right. So we are planning, we're in close conversation with Clay County Public Health, watching our data and numbers very carefully. Our plans are working with as close to 6 as possible, but north of 3. So
Okay.
we're kind of working with that. Every building's different, every team is different, and that's the goal right now, assuming that our numbers keep trending the right way, and of course that Clay County Health is comfortable with us scaling back up on the 5th, which we feel comfortable that we'll be able to do so.
And then masks are still required when they're in the school building, correct?
Absolutely.
For students and staff regardless of,
Absolutely.
I've had COVID, I've had my vaccine, I've done whatever.
That's correct. Masks
The
still
mask, the
required.
mask mandate remains in place.
Okay.
And that's true across the community as relates to the county, so.
Because I'm hearing some kids are struggling with, I don't need to do this because I've already
Yeah.
had COVID, so I don't need to wear a mask. And
Yeah, we'll be re-communicating kind of those
Awesome.
expectations, so, but we do understand that there's some confusion in and around that.
I don't want to wear masks anymore. So, thanks, Steve.
You're welcome.
Other questions of Mr. Anderson? Appreciate him and his team for all the work that they've done behind the scenes on all things COVID, but especially as it relates to the work they've done in assisting with the community partners in the mass vaccine clinic with Operation Safe. So that in and of itself is quite an accomplishment for our Northland, so thank you. Dr. Vogelaar, in our Human Resources report under 4.05.
Thank you very much, and good evening. I appreciate the opportunity to give a highlight of the strategic work and the departmental work of Human Resources for the district. We've uploaded a form for you, and I'm going to just draw out from that some items and then answer any questions you have at the end. Under the strategic work, there's 2 broad kind of umbrella initiatives, one around wellness and the other is around affecting our teacher pipeline, so recruiting and growing your own. Under the wellness initiatives, as you know, we've been folding in financial health and wellness. Needs assessments that we've received from our employees indicate that financial health and wellness is a source of stress. And so what we can do to help raise awareness around financial wellness, and also the tools and resources that are available to assist our employees in health and wellness around finances is a priority. So we're continuing a series in partnership with PNC Bank. This month's offering was on teaching children to save and prioritize saving money. So that was the initiative, and that'll continue through April and May as we continue that partnership. The other wellness one is with regard to a new resource platform the Blue Cross Blue Shield of Kansas City is launching here at the end of March. It's coming out in 2 phases, and this is really to help us address a dilemma that we have where the best wellness initiatives are not one size fits all, but are really custom around employee needs. But we only want to know employees' health in the aggregate. We don't want individual health data. So Blue Cross Blue Shield's launching a platform that will keep that individual information away from us, but make available resources to individual employees based on their needs assessment, their health risk assessment data in phase 1, and then phase 2 will broaden that out to specific claims experience. So Blue Cross Blue Shield has that information and that data, and they work closely with individuals who seek them out through this platform to customize health and wellness activities and resources that will address those health risk factors. So we're excited about that rollout. helping us bridge that gap between what we know in the aggregate and what our employees need in the individual sense of the word. The other broad strategic work that we're doing is with regard to Grow Your Own. As you know, the one Grow Your Own activity is with regard to our students of color. Application deadlines have been met, applications are being reviewed, and interviews will take place in the month of April, and then our hope is to introduce the third cohort for our Grow Your Own Teacher program, the scholarshiping of students of color who want to make education their career passion. We hope to introduce that third cohort to you in the month of May at the May's board meeting. The other Grow Your Own is a new launch that that's taking place, and that's a Grow Your Own Teacher program from among our classified staff. We have a very large number of non-certificated employees who are in this profession because they desire to be classroom teachers. And so creating a conduit of support and service that help our classified staff who want to be classroom teachers realize that that dream for them is a goal that we have. So in partnership with the Kauffman Foundation and Teach Kansas City, we're launching an invitation to our classified staff to express interest in becoming classroom teachers, and then that will open the door for them to have resources available through Teach Kansas City to get credentialed in education and become teachers. I sent out an email to our classified employees earlier this week and have been very pleased with the replies to the email from many employees that I had no idea that they were interested in becoming a classroom teacher, kind of sharing their story. So we're already seeing the fruit of that. One nice perk with this partnership with Teach Kansas City is that it also opens the way for scholarship opportunities for our classified employees who want to be classroom teachers. And the launch this go-round is a $500 scholarship opportunity for employees. So in addition to opening that pathway for our classified employees, it also gets us very specific information then on which of our employees are interested in taking that path, and then we can follow up with those employees. We can create professional development opportunities with them. We can even link them with mentor teachers as they walk or embark on this journey. With regard to department updates, I won't go into all of the details that are there, but I do want to draw your attention to the Network for Education Effectiveness, Educator Effectiveness. This is our evaluation tool that we use, and we have wrapped up with our probationary teachers this season of classroom observations, and the data that is in the graph there that's included shows how those trend lines have improved. And specifically, we've got two district-wide indicators, 6.2 and 7.4, that we monitor from a district setting. Individual buildings have additional indicators that they prioritize that are unique to those buildings. But indicator 6.2 is new this year. This is the indicator that says teachers' communications with students are sensitive to cultural, gender, intellectual, and physical differences. So almost 700 observations took place across 400 individual teachers, and you see that growth trend. 6.3 is on a scale of 1 to 7. So it shows that 6.3 is a very good number with regard to a 7-point scale. The average yearly mean for that 6.3 across the whole year is 5.92, so just under 6. We're very pleased to see that growth among our teachers, considering that it is a priority for the district. The other one, 7.4, is teacher monitors the effective instruction on whole class and individual learning. That one included over 1,100 classroom observations of more than 600, almost 700 individual teachers, and the average for the year is 5.84 on that. And again, you see that trend over the course of the year. So these data points do help inform us on the professional development work that we're doing around these indicators and whether they're taking root. Obviously, professional development that stays head knowledge is of no value to kids, but if it transfers into practice, then it makes a difference in the lives of individual students. And certainly these data points seem to indicate that there's growth and progression with regard to the transfer of that professional learning into classroom practice. With that, I'll take any questions that you have, but that's the Human Resources report for March.
I was really glad to hear that we were able to do something for our non-certified staff, because there are quite a few that you wouldn't realize are interested in the field.
Yeah. And the conversations I've had is many of them don't know that education is what they want, that it's a passion for them. They have a job opportunity, they step through that door, they get in there and they realize that this is really a field that they are madly in love with, and then that is what opens up their passion in pursuit of a classroom teaching job.
That's great.
Other questions for Dr. Vogelaar? Okay, thank you. Last item then, as far as 4.06, Superintendent's Report, several of my updates were taken by Cabinet, so I appreciate them stepping into that. But I do have really 2 or 3 items to add. Wanted to clarify something that was brought up earlier as it relates to summer school offerings for those here, but then also watching online. We have information posted on our LPS webpage as it relates to our summer school course offerings over the course of the next several months. And so if you'll visit us online at lps53.org, you can access the summer school page either under the Families Connection or the Student Connection. And so just a couple of quick highlights there. Our summer school session will run June 3rd through June 30th. Information that's contained, we're currently in that open enrollment window as far as trying to get a sense of which students are interested in summer school, but then also from an HR element, staffing summer school. And that we know our staff are tired, and so we are wanting to solicit their help in being able to fill the teaching positions that are available in the month of June, and we'll bring that to a close in the coming weeks. In addition to that, offering both face-to-face as well as virtual summer school opportunities. Virtual opportunities for grades 1 through 8, as well as face-to-face opportunities for kindergarten, has a list of our sites and our times, and additional information will follow as the coming weeks unfold and as we conclude the regular term. The other piece that I would mention is that several years ago we started with a performing arts segment to our summer school, in which our fine arts department provided a couple of theatrical opportunities in the month of June. That has since grown over the course of last summer during the pandemic, but then also over this year into a creative arts academy. So we're excited to be able to unveil that for students that are interested in that opportunity this summer as well. A couple of other updates related to work going on in the district. We are collaborating with the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education through our involvement in the Commissioner's Education Policy Committee. That work is being done in conjunction with DESE, but then also with the Hunt Institute, in and around kind of focusing on the future for our state as it relates to strategic planning. So we have another convening later this week. Tomorrow we'll be in Jefferson City and participating with the Commissioner and an advisory council just to hear additional updates as it relates to this work. Last item that I would mention out of Jefferson City, they have been on spring session in the legislature for the last few days. Have reconvened yesterday, and so we know we're on the kind of the back end of this legislative session as far as that final stretch. And we'll continue to watch that very closely as we aim for that May 14th conclusion of the session. Missouri School Boards Association is hosting on Monday, April 12th, both an in-person as well as a streamlined option in terms of participating in the legislative session, their legislative convening that they do each spring. So we'll look forward to jumping on that virtually and hearing what's going on within the legislature, but then also reaching out to our local senators and representatives on items that might impact public education. Those are my additions to the report this evening, unless there are questions from board members. Thank you.
That moves us to unfinished business, 5.01, our board policy revisions.
2 items posted then under 5.01. One is for your consideration this evening. This is a second read for policy GCBA related to professional staff compensation. The second item under 5.01 is policies for review on first read that you'll see again in the month of April. That is on policy IKC, class rankings, valedictorian, salutatorian, and then IKF, graduation requirements. These are tied to a follow-up item you'll see later on this evening as it relates to our tiered diploma proposal. But nonetheless, we're putting those policies in front of you that then we'll bring back in April for your consideration.
And GCBA, that's more of a, we have to do it because it's a new law, correct?
Requirement from that standpoint. Anything to add to that, Bob, as far as GCBA?
The main component of that requirement on House Bill 604 is with regard to teacher externships and opportunities to leverage that for horizontal movement on the salary schedule. So that's the main new element that doesn't exist currently.
Yep.
Yeah. Okay.
I move the board adopt policy GCBA on second read.
Second.
AJ,
Yes.
Scott?
Yes.
Angie?
Yes.
David?
Yes.
Andy?
Yes.
Nick?
Yes.
Kim Marie?
Yes.
Motion carries.
All right, 5.02, architectural and engineering services.
Under 5.02, we've been working on this for some time and have kind of hit the pause button or tapped the brakes a little bit over the course of the last several months, given the pandemic and other items taking precedence. But this evening, we wanted to bring two items to you for your consideration. One, as it relates to facilities master planning services, and then the second, as it relates to architectural engineering services. So we'll turn it over to Mr. Anderson to give us a quick overview of those two items.
Thank you. Yeah, so this was actually, if everything had gone according to plan, this would have been approved last year about this time. So as Dr. Tucker mentioned, we pushed this about a year. So this was in front of you last month on first read for both architectural and engineering services, and then also facility master planning. We went through a pretty a long and significant process in the vetting process. And as we mentioned last month, we did decide and recommend to bring forward Hollis and Miller again on both accounts. And so both of these contracts are in front of you. And I would just draw out the architectural and engineering services contract is very similar to the one from 4 years ago. There's been a slight adjustment to the rates of pay for the various staff, just cost of living increases, but pretty slight. And we also managed to negotiate down one or two minor kind of adjustments the right way for us in some of the percentages that they had in place for kind of pass-through services when they help facilitate work with engineering folks and so forth. So I think if anything, it's a little bit better contract for us, and I think the one we had a few years ago was a good, strong, and fair contract. With respect to the master planning, appreciate Kevin Nelson providing, if you looked at that last sheet, that kind of showed kind of a range and also compared the last master plan work that they did back a few years ago. And so right now, we'll kind of play it a little bit by year, but we have a range between about $54,000 and $78,000. Last go around, we spent about $102,000. And a lot of that has to do with, back with Hollis and Miller, that we can take advantage of a lot of the legwork that they did a few years ago. So they'll revisit that, but they won't have to get as involved. So that, I think that serves us well. In terms of timeline, more to come on that. I think we've been having some good conversations, but we're going to try to line this up over the course of the summer and fall that we can get started on the master planning process.
Any questions of Steve on that item? Okay.
You want two separate actions? Or?
Please.
Yeah, okay. I move the board approve the Facilities Master Planning Services Agreement with Hollis and Miller Architects.
Second.
AJ?
Yes.
Scott?
Yes.
Angie?
Yes.
David?
Yes.
Andy?
Yes.
Nick?
Yes.
Kim Marie?
Yes.
Motion carries.
And I move the board approve the Architectural and Engineering Services Agreement with Hollis and Miller Architects.
Second.
AJ?
Yes.
Scott?
Yes.
Angie?
Yes.
David?
Yes.
Andy?
Yes.
Nick?
Yes.
Kim Marie?
Yes.
Motion carries.
5.03, tiered high school diploma.
So 5.03, we have shared with you previously, and we're bringing that to you this evening for second read. This really pulls together a lot of the work we've been doing over the last couple of years in our strategic plan effort, our graduate profile, our partnership with Kauffman Foundation and other districts around real world learning, getting smart. So this is one element of that and the accompanying board policies that you saw earlier. So Dr. Moore, would you like to add to that?
Yeah, so just as a reminder for this, the tiered diploma system would have three options for students: the silver seal, which would be the state requirements; the gold seal, which would be our current LPS recommended requirements; and then the platinum seal, which is the distinguished. And that would be 28 requirements. This, with each one, also an 1 to 2 MBAs would be required. That would start with the class of 2025, which is our current 8th grade class. So they would start next year knowing that these are the tracks that they can take. We're also working on ICAPs for all students. So that kind of helps them plan out their next 4 years. In addition, the cum laude experience would start with the next year's class, so the class of 2022. And that would allow us to be more inclusive and recognize more students for their hard work. At last time, after announcing it, I shared that we would get parent and student feedback. And so we did some focus groups, and that feedback from parents and students overall was very positive about allowing more students to be recognized and having the option to personalize their high school experience. So we appreciate you looking at this tonight.
So just to follow up on that, were there any negatives that came out of your conversations with parents or students?
Yes, a few students, and it wasn't many, not really from parents, but a few students thought that the cum laude system watered down a little bit, that it had too many people. And really that was probably 2 students total who brought that up. But we did recognize that and talked about our desire to recognize more students for their hard work. And that doesn't diminish the work that they did if they're valedictorian. It doesn't diminish the work that we're going to honor more students.
Yep.
Okay. Other questions?
And the only change for hours really comes in the electives, right? You got to have all your bases, just state minimum. So it's electives that are really the shift here. The more you take more electives.
You take more, and then math.
Okay.
Math is also critical, that most
Got it.
students have to take the 3 years, and we really encourage students to take 4 years of
Yep.
math.
Okay.
And part of the trade-off too, albeit, if you're at that minimum requirement, that does open up space within your schedule.
Sure.
That then allows for that market value asset time requirement to kind of slide in. So theoretically, that's how that trade-off looks, but at the same time, it could also result in some early grads,
Yep.
right? So it's really one market value asset. If you can aim for 2, then that would put you in another category. My sense is that many of our students will have multiple market value assets, but then at the same time, we want to ensure that they at least have 1, and it will be a struggle for some. And how can we support them in getting across the finish line, meeting their graduation requirements, but then also that market value asset or MVA that then serves as that bridge between high school and whatever exists after high school, be it 2-year, 4-year, or straight into the armed services or the workplace. So that's exciting to be able to customize it or tailor it to whatever a student's interested in and aspiring toward.
Questions?
So I move the board approve the tiered diploma system and modify class rankings to include a cum laude system. Second.
AJ?
Yes.
Scott?
Yes.
Angie?
Yes.
David?
Yes.
Andy?
Yes.
Nick?
Yes.
Kim Marie?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Okay, moving us on to new business, our 2021-2022 compensation plan.
So you have several items that are uploaded under this item for your review. This is read number 1, so you'll have plenty of time between now and the next board meeting to familiarize yourself with the recommendations and the changes that we're bringing forward. I want to start by thanking Dr. Vogelaar, Cindy Sullivan, Team Liberty, and ADSAW, and all of the individuals that serve on those 2 committees. The ADSAW stands for Administrative Salary and Welfare Committee. And so they meet, Cindy and Bob meet with these 2 groups regularly on a variety of topics. But this time of year culminates in trying to finalize recommendations in the budget development process for the coming fiscal year as it relates to salary recommendations. So I appreciate the close work of Team Liberty on this. To kind of walk through the recommendations in kind of a summary approach, you have a document that is the recommendation presented to the board, again, for first read. It includes 4 items that total $2,029,318 in terms of the anticipated cost in looking at fiscal year 22. To break that apart, the first item is to be able to fund all salary schedules moving forward into the next year, both vertically and horizontally, which includes vertical steps as well as horizontal movement for credit attainment. That total is $1,735,048. In addition, The second piece is to honor the continued rollout or phasing of the CBIZ salary study that we've conducted over the last several years. This is the third year of a 4-year phase-in, and particularly applies to recommended column movement for classified staff on the classified schedule. The total anticipated cost attributed to that is $292,647. The third item is minimal, but it's our kind of our ability to hold harmless those employees that were impacted by a one-time $1,500 enhancement on the certificated schedule back in fiscal year 19. That total is $1,623. The last item, which was really derived from the work of our Administrator Salary and Welfare Committee, or ADSOL, is to eliminate the administrator travel stipend and replace it with a required off-site or after-hours work stipend. One of the key changes in eliminating the travel stipend and inserting this particular piece is while it's no cost to salary schedules, it does result in an anticipated $19,000 cost to the district for retirement benefits. So that is the breakdown of the total estimated costs associated with this recommendation. You have a little bit more detailed explanation that follows as it relates to those 4 areas. Again, presented to you for first read. We'll look at it again in April. The accompanying documents are really how this kind of folds through the entire system in our processes as it relates to schedules, as it relates to extra duty stipends, professional technical schedules, you name it. All of that is there and revised as we anticipate that roll into the next fiscal year. Dr. Vogelaar, Ms. Sullivan, anything to add as it relates to the work with Team Liberty or ADSOL?
The only thing I would add is my appreciation to you to this process. Team Liberty, we speak a lot about just how much their work is valued by the Board of Education, by Dr. Tucker. They do pour themselves into a lot of data. They spend a lot of time, listening to the changing landscape of the financial picture that obviously informs these decisions. But they do that because they know that when recommendations bubble up, they are taken very seriously. And I appreciate Dr. Tucker, posting his recommendation to you alongside the recommendation that comes out of Team Liberty and ADSOL, because you really do get a chance to see that it is without modification that Dr. Tucker brings that forward. And that speaks volumes to the trust and value of the process that Team Liberty puts in. The second thing I want to mention is that this is a dynamic process, going between first read and second read, and things change. And when they change, we want to get those updates in front of you and draw your attention to those changes. One example is we had a position that changed over and resulted in a recommendation to eliminate the position, and so eliminating it from the salary schedule is necessary. That all happened after we posted the salary schedule, so we posted a new one with that elimination in there. Between board meetings, any changes we make will accompany that with updates and communication to you to draw your attention to it. But as far as what you see tonight, there were 3 changes to salary schedules that took place on the classified schedule. There was the elimination of the accounting analyst position on column O. That's the eliminated position I just made reference to. On the admin salary schedule, there was the elimination of the travel stipend, so you see that redlined in there. And on the miscellaneous stipend schedule, the elimination of 2 of the travel stipends, the 684 and the 2400 was eliminated. The 1104 remains because that travel stipend is necessary for some employees who are not administrators. We didn't want to have a reduction in salary because of that. And so that upload occurred as well after the initial posting. And then the memos had some wording changes just to better clarify where those recommendations come from and what those recommendations mean.
So again, presented to you this evening for first read. If you have questions or thoughts or need additional clarification, please let us know between now and the April meeting, and we'll certainly be glad to provide answers for you. So, okay.
All right. 6.02, preliminary revenue budget update. The Ms. Sullivan Show.
Yeah, we'll welcome Cindy Sullivan back to the podium. And as we've done for the last several years, really going back about 6 years, we've started the process of bringing information to the board. We do that monthly, but at the same time, as it relates to budget development and planning, We used to hold a finance retreat in June, if you'll remember. Well, then we kind of broke that apart into its three components: the revenue piece and looking at anticipated revenues in 1 month, looking at expenditures the following month, bringing a draft document to you, and then finalizing that budget development process in the month of June with a finalized budget, knowing that as soon as it's approved, it is probably wrong because things are so fluid and continue to move and evolve. So in the month of March, we wanted to bring forward some information as it relates to planning around revenue and preliminary budget projections. So we'll turn it over to Ms. Cindy.
Thank you, Dr. Tucker. And as is evidenced by that last comment of his, my presentation is already somewhat out of date because of information I received today. So I'll tell you about that as I did earlier, but there will be some changes already, I know. So as always, any information presented tonight is subject to change based on any information that I do receive in the coming days. As I go through this, please stop me if you have questions about what I'm talking about, and that way we won't have to go back, but don't hesitate to do that as we work our way through this. The first slide I wanted to show you tonight is the picture of the total revenue budget. As of most recently, this budget is projected to be right at $173.7 million. This is about $1.9 million less than the current year budget, and that is mainly due to the typical ups and downs in things that have changed. But one thing we will not see next year that we saw this year was the sale of devices. So we had our technology refresh, and we did sell all of those devices, which accounts for the most of that reduction that you will see in the overall revenue budget. And as you will note, the total revenue budget is highly dependent upon local revenue to 57% and state revenue to 39%. And I've listed the sources so you can see what we mainly rely on for that revenue. For operating revenue, that budget is projected currently to be $151 million. That is basically flat compared to our budget revenue this current year for operating expenditures. You will note that local jumps up, decreases to about 51%, and state increases to about 44.5% for operating budget. And that is due to state revenue all going to operating budgets. So 100% is in funds 1 and 2. For property tax revenue, that is divided out between operating revenue, debt service, and capital projects. So less of that is spent in the operating as compared to the overall budget. We're going to then look a little closer at local and county sources. We are anticipating no change in our overall levy, so it should remain at $6.455 per $100 of assessed valuation, just like it is this year. The only thing that may change due to fluctuations in the CPI, which is the Consumer Price Index, is pennies changing from debt service to operating, which we have traditionally seen in the past. But there will be no levy increase to pass on to taxpayers, so nothing should change for them. That has been the same in the past few years. We're anticipating a 5% increase in assessed valuation. The difficulty in predicting assessed valuation this year is that the crystal ball has cracked a little bit. We are now a charter county in Clay County. So as a result of that, all of the information that we will receive has been moved back a month. So instead of getting a preliminary assessed valuation in June, I won't be getting that information until July. And we have a statutory requirement to pass our budget by June 30. So I won't have the information I have had in the past to give you a better number for assessed valuation. So we will do the best we can with that, but know that, as always, we have a budget amendment in September. That will be in October this year because the levy hearing won't be until September, but it may be a little bit bigger, a little bit different than we're used to, just because of the lack of current information. I still am in contact with the county, And they will provide me with the best information they can, but all of their processes are pushed back a month as well. So we're flying a little bit differently this year than we're used to. So we'll make the best of it and do what we can with that. Another change that's coming this year is that the 3 largest Shoal Creek TIF projects are rolling off of TIF. That is around $100 million of assessed valuation. That could drastically change the look of our assessed value this year too, because when they roll off of TIF, they should roll into new construction. And I will be communicating with the assessor's office as well on that. And that's a very big, important piece to us, because that new construction is not subject to the Hancock Amendment. The Hancock Amendment is what caps our revenue to be no more than an increase to the percentage of the Consumer Price Index. So it's 1.4%, but that $100 million is not subject to that cap. So it's very important that we get that labeled as new construction. So we will be working with the assessor's office on that. The other thing you can see here that we have our increased collection rate, which as of today, we were up to 98.59%. This time last year, we were at 97.79. We have already collected more property tax revenue than we budgeted for this year, and that's, like I expressed earlier, due to better collections. That delinquent revenue that we didn't get last year is coming in, so that will show an increase in our budget for next year as well. The things to be concerned about are COVID considerations. Still, I believe next year could result in tax protests because of the way that county treatment of shutdown and things like that. If businesses did not get the opportunity to open, they may protest some of their taxes. So that still could be a consideration when we do look at our local and county revenue.
Cindy, is it just, as we look at the pilots moving over
Yeah.
to the new construction, that it's just moving from one bucket to the other, right? We're getting same amount of revenue?
Yes.
Okay.
And we get the same amount of revenue. What you may see happen, however, is that it won't all go into operating.
Got it.
Because it's that property tax revenue. Pilots all go into operating.
Gotcha.
But when it becomes regular county tax revenue, it's then
Splits out.
divided up between the levy amounts between operating, debt service, and capital projects.
Got it.
The increase will all be there, just split just a little bit.
Okay.
So, yeah, but it is just shifting revenue
Yep.
at that point. Anything else before I move on? So on this slide, I always like to show this slide because it shows the pattern. History repeats itself. So there is our 5% assessed value projection on the end there on the dashed line. But we saw the decline last year, partially due to COVID, and then we're inching our way back up. I'm just very thankful that we did not decline as far as we did in 2009. So hopefully we'll see that pattern continue on the way up. This is a reassessment year. Residential values have been increasing over the past 2 years. All I have heard from the county this year so far is that we should expect an increase in land values. That didn't tell me very much, so I'm still waiting for some more information. And I talked to Sandy Baldwin and the county clerk quite often, and Kathy Reinhardt in the assessor's office. So it indicated also in the earlier slide that COVID considerations again could affect this as well. So we'll see, more to come on that. And then we're going to move on to state sources. So our state sources are all DESE related, Department of Elementary and Secondary Education. We are expecting an increase of $1 million in our funding from the state, and that's due primarily to student growth. And we talked earlier last month about the governor releasing the withholding of funds so that we will be fully funded in our foundation formula revenue this year. All indications are that that should be the case again next year. So we have budgeted for a fully funded foundation formula next year as well. To date, the state net general revenue collections have increased 18.4% for the year through February. And much of this, unfortunately, though, is due to the filing date changes of the income tax forms. most of that revenue was pushed into this fiscal year at the expense of last fiscal year. And so we won't see that happen next year. To this point, we've already gotten one extension now to May. So if they keep extending that, we could have this same pattern repeat itself next year. I don't anticipate that happening, but next year will definitely be different because we won't have that same revenue pattern. So we'll have some analyzing to do to that. The bad news in all of this is that the collections that were moved into this year will trigger the next Senate Bill 509 tax cut in January of 22. And that will cut 0.1% on our state income tax. We will realize or see half of that tax cut beginning in January of 22, so half of it in FY22. So my main concern is not with FY22 at this point, it is with FY23 and FY24 when we realize a full year of that tax cut. So I think FY22 will be fine, but again, I'm really looking more toward what's going to happen the year after. As far as state funding, early childhood special education is mandatory, and so it will be fully funded. In transportation, we are expecting no increase in that funding. And if there are to be cuts to be made, it's usually transportation that gets cut first. So not anticipating that next year with the state funding as it is, but you never know. So that's what we know on that. As far as our federal sources, this again is probably the one that I know the least about. We will not have federal allocations for federal programs until May or June. And this is because DESE is having a little bit of an issue with the reduction in free and reduced lunch applications. Since most people have declined to fill them out because they're getting their lunches and breakfast and meals paid for, there is really no need for them to feel any urgency to complete a free and reduced application. So they are down statewide. And why that is concerning is because that drives the determination of title programs. You have to have a certain percentage of free and reduced lunch applications in order to become a title school. So that has dropped off significantly in the state. The other reason that's concerning is because census poverty rates have risen, so the two are not correlating. And therefore it's been difficult for DESE to determine how to allocate federal funding. And they're trying to problem solve around that to be better served for districts to get appropriate allocations, but they're trying to figure out if they need to use FY19 free and reduced numbers or exactly how to allocate that. So that's the holdup on those allocations. So we're waiting, and that's all. They said more to come, more to come. We'll let you know as soon as we know. That's about 3% of our budget. So I budgeted flat, hoping that they go back to FY19 and use our numbers for that. So only 3%, still 3%. So hopefully our allocation will stay up there after they get their situation resolved. IDEA, same thing. It's currently flat allocated. Once we get those numbers, as always, this slide will be updated. You see the fall between last year, or this current year, and projected for next year due to COVID funds. So we did not budget for any COVID funds. We know there is another stimulus package on the way. So once we know what that allocation is, we'll be able to budget for that as well. So the last slide here just shows you comparison. And you can see for the last 4 years, we've been pretty even across the board. So we don't anticipate a large amount of change anywhere, and a lot of that's due to our slower growth and just the funding being very, very much the same. On Board Docs, we posted these slides. I have also posted a detailed revenue report that breaks down all of the accounts that you can compare FY19, and that's actual, FY20's budget, and FY20, excuse me, I'm a year off, FY20 actual, FY21 budget, and FY22 projected budget. So you can see the categories and how they break down. So that's where we stand with revenue. Do you have any additional questions I can answer on these things for you? No surprises. Okay, next month we'll talk about expenditures then.
The other thing is you met with the Audit and Finance Committee
Yes.
last night.
Yes.
And shared the same information.
Yes, they've seen all of this as well.
Yeah, as well as planning this along the way with Team Liberty, as well as our AdSaw committee. So
Yes.
a lot of messaging coming out of the Business Services Department. So thank you to Cindy for
Thank you.
spearheading that as well as her team. Okay? So again, we'll see that continue on in April as it relates to our expenditures update. So.
Okay, thank you, Cindy. That moves us to 6.03, contracts, purchases, and bids.
We have several items that we wanted to provide an update on, so we'll turn it over to Mr. Anderson to walk us through them.
Thank you. A handful of emergency expedited purchases and actions that we had to move on over the past several weeks, and I'll walk through these fairly quickly. The first one was with respect to an issue up at Warren Hills in the rooftop unit. That one we do not have an attached contract, but we have it not to exceed as we kind of work through the details with the agreements with that vendor. And then we have two agreements with ADS, American Digital Security, and this is with respect to providing fire and burglar alarm systems at the library building that we purchased recently. We also needed to move some trailers around with American Trailer and Storage. We did enter into an agreement with the folks over at Children's Mercy with respect to graduation. We needed to process that fairly quickly because of some need to kind of move that forward. And then last, a contract with Cornerstones of Care with regard to needs of a specific student. So all those have been kind of moved through the system. So take any questions.
Any questions on those items?
I move the board approve the emergency purchases and agreements as listed.
Second.
AJ?
Yes.
Scott?
Yes.
Angie?
Yes.
David?
Yes.
Andy?
Yes.
Nick?
Yes.
Kimberly?
Yes.
Motion carries.
All right. Board of Education section. 7.01 is legislation and advocacy. Angie, do you have any items?
MSBA sent out a little survey. It's like 3 questions, but you have to write your answers. Not my favorite thing to do, but I encourage you to fill that out. There hasn't been much else going on. Legislators just came off break. But basically, if there's education stuff up, talk to somebody. Educate someone.
But then if interested in participating in that MSBA session, you all can let Sandra know. And then we
On the
can-
12th?
On the 12th, yeah, April 12th, so.
Lots of interesting legislation between now and the end of the session. All right, upcoming meetings. Next study session, April 6th, followed by our regular board meeting on the 20th, when we will reorganize.
Yeah.
And 7.03 board remarks. So I just have a quick remark because I know we have people watching at home and who will be watching a live replay later. The Board of Education meeting is intended to be a meeting between members of the Board of Education. And because we are elected, we are required to adhere to Missouri Sunshine Law. And that means we're required to post an agenda and we're required to stick to that agenda. And so while we have a section for public comment, we are unable to engage in dialogue because it's not included on the agenda, and we're unable to answer questions from the audience during the meeting. So while it may appear that we're not interested in hearing from people, we really do have some legal prescriptions that we're required to adhere to. We're more than happy to answer questions at the beginning of the meeting or after the meeting or one-on-one at any time. Just we're not able to engage in dialogue in the middle of the meeting. That's my comment.
I would like to thank all of those people who have worked to get buildings ready for more students to appear. That's a lot of work to reconfigure those classrooms, so thank you for taking care of that.
Seen lots of grounds people out and about and busy this past week.
I'll also just say thanks. I see him back there, so Trey and the IT team, I know they're all around here. Look, we don't always recognize everything that goes into it. I know there's been some things that have happened around the city this week to other districts, and I just appreciate all the effort you all put into making sure we can get up and running and network safe and secure. And I know it's more than a full-time job, so thank you.
I would just want to reiterate growing your own in terms of the classified staff. I really think that's a forward-thinking move, and I'm impressed because you got people that are involved in the district, and so I think that's very thoughtful, and I'm very supportive of it.
And well received from staff. We were
Yeah.
talking about that this morning in a cabinet meeting, and several have already reached out and expressed their appreciation, but then also their interest. So.
I think we're setting a new record for board's remarks, but we're going to do this next week. We're going to thank Mr. Evans for his years of service.
Next
But
month.
this was his
Next
last
month.
full meeting.
Right.
That's right.
So, thank you, David.
Thank you, Scott. Appreciate it.
But
I'm
we'll do
not-
that again.
I'm not prepared to have remarks.
We'll do that
about
again next
tonight.
month.
You can work on your remarks between now and then, right?
That's going to be a tough one.
And I move the board adjourn.
All right.
Second.
Sandra?
Baird. AJ?
Yes.
Scott?
Yes.
Angie?
Yes.
David?
Yes.
Andy?
Yes.
Nick?
Yes.
Kim Marie?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.